I'm Casey and this is Jeremy, and we are Maddie and Jeremiah Hurley's parents, and they are both miracle kids. So we could start with Maddie's story. When I was 19 weeks pregnant with Maddie, about halfway through my pregnancy, we went in for a routine ultrasound, and they told us that she had what was called a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, and they told us that only 50% of babies born with a congenital diaphragmatic hernia survive, which was very scary for us as first-time parents. When we had the ultrasound tech came in and was looking, and she left the room and said she had to go grab the doctor, that she needed the doctor to come in and talk to us. So it was pretty serious, pretty fast. We came home and looked it up. We had no idea what it even was. And they basically explained it to us as there's a small hole in the diaphragm, and sometimes a small little bit of intestines or stomach can go up through the diaphragm in the little hole. But sometimes there can be a bigger hole and other organs will float up into the chest cavity, causing the lungs to not have much room to develop. So we saw a specialist the rest of my pregnancy. We had ultrasounds every week to make sure that she was growing and everything was okay. I remember being really scared because my doctor kept telling me that our best option was to go out of state. And being first-time parents, having to go out of state and be so far away from your friends and your family, going through such a hard time, especially when only 50% of these babies survive. I remember my mom told me on the way home from that doctor's appointment that she said, you know, Casey, your dad and I will be there for you every step of the way, but at some point we will have to come back home and go to work so that we can help you guys financially if Jeremy has to be off work this whole time. And we talked about it, and we just knew there was no way we could be so far away from home. So we went back to my doctor the next week and told him, you know, there's got to be somebody here in Oklahoma that can help us, or we can at least talk to. And he said there is somebody that's been doing some research here lately and has had some pretty good outcomes, and he's at Children's Hospital in Oklahoma City, so why don't you go meet with him? I'll set up an appointment. And we did. We went and met with Dr. Lutton the very next week, and we knew right away we were right where we were supposed to be. He explained things in more detail, explained that we really wouldn't know the baby's outcome until she was born, that it was just waiting until she was born to see how severe her defect was. So we toured the NICU, and the nurses gave us kind of a rundown of what life would be like. He told us to expect to be there for a minimum of 4 to 5 months. So we were definitely feeling blessed that we didn't have to go out of state for that long of a time frame. When she was born, Dr. Lutton came to my room. It took them 6 hours to get her stable to where he could even come and give me an update. So we just sat and waited for 6 whole hours, not knowing if she was okay or what was going on. He came in my room and he said, okay, it's much more serious than I thought. This is the worst defect I think I've seen in my career. I've done x-rays. He did some other tests. He said he couldn't be for sure until he did her surgery and got in there to see for himself, but he thought that all of her abdominal organs were up in her chest, and her heart was pushed all the way over to the right side of her chest. She was born on a Tuesday. It took them from Tuesday until Friday to be able to get her stable enough to be able to even have a chance to survive her surgery. He told us at that point that he thought her liver and her colon and her spleen were all up in her chest, not just her intestines, and it looked like her left lung hadn't developed at all, and this meant that she only had, if even, a 10% chance to survive. So we dropped from 50% to 20% or 10%, which was just devastating. She had her surgery, and because everything had developed in her chest. When they pulled everything back down and they made a patch, they made a new diaphragm out of a patch made out of Gore-Tex. Her abdomen, because of the way everything developed, couldn't shut. He couldn't close the incision, and it left for almost a week. She was left with her abdomen open with her intestines outside of her body until her body could adjust, because every time he tried to close the incision, she would crash and just tank. And he came out and told us that he just didn't know. He felt like the surgery probably was going to do her in. He didn't think she was going to make it through it. So then we made it through that. He needed to put her on a different kind of ventilator after that. And we were just taking it minute by minute at that point. And then come the following Monday morning, we get a call that they had to bump her oxygen levels, were crashing, and they had to bump her oxygen all the way up to 100% oxygen. And on the new ventilator, she was not doing well. We had been told before she was born that the reason she needed to be born at Children's Hospital in Oklahoma City was because they have what is called ECMO, and that's a heart and lung bypass machine, and they're the only hospital in the state at that time who could put babies on ECMO. And so that Monday morning, we were told that she needed to go on ECMO, and
he had also told us that he had never done that at a week old. Most of the time when babies go on ECMO, they go on within the first couple days and not after the surgery. So this was going to be a new experience for him, something he had never tried, but because she showed that she can fight, he was willing to do the surgery to give her a chance. So that's whenever he went ahead and asked us, is it okay to put her on ECMO? And we said, do whatever you have to do.
And it was scary because here you have this doctor that you have all the faith in the world in, and I'm probably going to cry. But I just remember we were sitting in the waiting room, and the doctor was having a hard time walking away because he was even so worried that she wasn't going to make it, because he was so unsure of what was going to happen, because he hadn't ever put a baby on ECMO at a week old with this defect before. So we just decided, you have to do what you have to do to save her. And she went on ECMO, and it was just exactly what her body needed. She bounced back fairly quickly. And what ECMO does is it takes all of the blood out of your body and runs it through an artificial heart and lung and oxygenates the blood and pumps it, and it warms it and pumps it back into your body and gives your heart and your lungs a break. And what we weren't prepared for was, while she was laying there, the machines were so big and took up so much of the room. ECMO babies have their own room because of this, and because they're the sickest babies in the hospital when they're on that machine. We weren't expecting to see our baby laying there without her chest moving up and down. You couldn't see her breathing because the machine was literally doing everything for her heart and her lungs. It was very, very scary. She was on ECMO from Monday until Thursday. She was doing really well and bouncing back, and they told us that they were ready to wean her off of ECMO and put her back on a regular ventilator, see how she did. And ECMO is a surgery to put on and to take off. So at that time, when they took her off ECMO on Friday, she had surgery. They closed her abdomen, and she was actually doing really well. And they always told us from the very beginning, the biggest challenge for babies born with diaphragmatic hernia is once they have their corrective surgery, if they go on ECMO and they come off, usually after that they're out of the woods, and they just have to focus on learning how to eat. And that's hard for them because of all the muscles that have been cut during ECMO. They have to learn how to suck, swallow, and breathe all over again, because before it comes natural. But after all those muscles have been damaged, they have to be essentially trained all over again. We weren't sure what the outcome would be for her because how severe her defect was. Her left lung wasn't developed at all. There was just a lung bud, and they told us that her lung would grow and take up the space, but it would never be a fully functioning lung. It would not have all of the working units. And because of that, when they started trying to feed her for the first time, she had gone almost 2 weeks
It was a week.
without eating.
Oh, yes,
It was
yes,
several.
yes.
It was several weeks before they tried to feed her through a feeding tube in her nose. They tried to feed her just the tiniest amount. I remember it was just 1 cc of milk per hour.
Looked like drops.
Just one teeny tiny drop every hour, and something went terribly wrong, and they don't know if she aspirated or what happened, but she crashed. And I remember him telling us, she's probably not going to make it. I have nothing else left to do. I have no more tricks up my sleeve, were his exact words. And it was another one of those times where he came in and you could already see how attached he had been to her because of how much of a fighter she was. She's been feisty from the day she was born. And he was worried. He kept putting his hand on his forehead and just saying, I just don't know what else to do. And one of the reasons we really love him is because he wasn't too proud to call in another doctor and ask for help. And so he called in a neonatologist. Dr. Lawrence came in, and we were prepared to lose her that night. We had called our preacher in. We had said our goodbyes. We told her that we knew she had fought really hard, but it was okay, and we understood if she was tired. And so Dr. Letton said, I'm not giving up. I'm going to call this other doctor, and we're going to see if she has something else she can do. And she came in, and our nurses were scared to go home that night because they didn't think Maddie was going to make it through the night. And you get so attached, those people become your family. Dr. Lawrence came in the next morning, and she said, I want to try this new ventilator. It's actually not a new ventilator.
It's an old
It
one.
was a very old ventilator that they hadn't used in years. And I remember one of the nurses came in on the morning shift, and she said, I can't believe that doctor is going to use that ventilator, because they had to go drag it out of the basement because it hadn't been used in so long. And she got that new ventilator, and it was exactly what she needed. She turned from gray to pink in a matter of just a couple of hours. And I really truly feel, had we been in a different hospital, I don't know that that would have been the outcome, because the way everybody works as a team at Children's Hospital was just amazing. It just blew us away. What else after that? We learned that she had chronic lung disease. That's why she crashed. And they told us that we needed to understand that just because she had the surgery to fix her diaphragm, it was not a cure. This was something she would deal with for the rest of her life. They told us no daycare. If you need somebody to care for her, you need to have them come into the home. She cannot get sick because of her fragile lungs. Flu season is a nightmare for us. It's very scary. We have to be so careful with washing hands and who we're around, and making sure all of our friends and family know that if you have the sniffles, you can't come over. So it's a lifelong journey for her, and we learned that very early on. She ended up being in the hospital for a total of 3 months. She was on the ventilator for almost 2.5, really almost 2 months. 2 months. And she came home with oxygen and a feeding tube. Monitors. We came home. It's scary enough coming home as a first-time parent. And then when you come home with all these cables and wires and things that beep in the middle of the night.
She had a central line also.
She also had a central
So
line.
she had to have a home nurse come in.
Yeah, we had a home health nurse come in and monitor all of her equipment. So she had the oxygen until she was 2, and then the feeding tube until she was 2.5, and she was able to start eating on her own and gaining weight. So we removed the feeding tube.
1-year-old, her first birthday.
Yeah, when she was 1 on her first birthday. She was fine. We were celebrating her birthday, and it was a very, very big deal because they told us when we left the hospital we would be so lucky if she even lived to be a year, and then it was, you'll be lucky if she even makes it to 5. She was actually one of the first survivors of a defect as big as hers, so her doctor called her the first generation. So we made a very big deal out of her first birthday. We were completely overwhelmed with gratitude for all the help and support we had received. So on her birthday, we're happy, everything's going great. She lays down to take a nap, and then she wakes up running a fever of 103. And she had been without her oxygen during the day at that point and only needed it at night when she was asleep. But we went from not needing the oxygen while she was awake to having to turn her oxygen up as high as they would let us turn it up at home.
And continuing to turn it up as we're on our way to
on
the
our way to
emergency
the
room.
hospital at Children's. And we were definitely scared. We had no idea what to expect. And they did chest x-rays, and they told us that she had pneumonia, which was one of our biggest fears, but also that her diaphragm, the patch her diaphragm was made out of, had come undone. So they called Dr. Letton immediately, and he was in a surgery, and we had to wait for a few hours for him to come. And he explained to us that he didn't think she was having a hard time breathing from her diaphragm, that she had had a nasty respiratory virus, but we just happened to catch the diaphragmatic hernia again because of the x-ray. But he did say it would need surgery. He wanted her to get over the virus and then come back and have the surgery. That was a month later.
Yes.
She had the surgery. It took her a little over a month to recoup from that virus. We had the surgery. She was in intensive care for a week. She had a chest tube. It was a very grueling surgery for a baby.
They had to do spinal tap. What was it? The inner spine? Had some needle in her spine.
I have no idea what you're talking about. So she was in the hospital for a week, and looking back, we didn't realize how sick she was before because she was a whole new baby when she came home. She just felt so much better. She started walking right off the bat. She was just a happy-go-lucky little kid. You never knew that she had been through so much. When she was in the NICU, she had surgery to correct her diaphragm. She had surgery to go on ECMO. She had surgery to come off ECMO and to close her abdomen. And then a few weeks later, they ended up doing another surgery to go in and put a feeding tube in. And then they noticed that she had an obstruction in her bowels, so she had part of her bowels removed. So just the first few weeks of life, she had been through so much. And you would never know it by looking at her. She's just the happiest kid, and always has been. And then we were clipping along, and things were going good. And when she was 2.5, her baby brother came along.
Before that, she had because of all the previous surgeries, she ended up having to have her tonsils out at 2.
Yeah, she had her tonsils out at 2.
That actually helped in itself to allow her to eat more because her tonsils were pretty much touching, and she had already had the other issues from the previous surgeries to the point she had texture issues with the food. She couldn't swallow very well, so after that surgery she really bounced back again and started thriving at that point.
which just goes to show, tonsillectomy is such a normal thing. Almost everybody has their tonsils out, it seems. But for Maddie, nothing is ever that simple. Because her tonsils were big, she wouldn't eat, she wasn't gaining the weight, and then when she had those out, she was able to start eating. I remember I took a picture the very first time she made a happy plate, because that was the very first time she had ever eaten all the food on her plate, and it was a huge deal for us. And that's when she was able to get rid of her feeding tube, because she could finally eat and swallow her food. And then we found out we were expecting her brother. And because of everything we had been through with Maddie, I saw the same specialist during my pregnancy. And I had an ultrasound on Friday, and he was born on the following Tuesday. I had him at OU in Edmond because I thought, I love Children's Hospital. They've done so much for us, but I want to go have a normal experience. And Jeremiah had totally different plans for us. I had him by C-section. It was scheduled and planned. However, the minute he was born, he crashed. They told us his blood sugar had dropped. He was having trouble breathing. He was in respiratory distress. They got me back to my room, and I remember a pediatrician came in and said, I really think he needs to be on a ventilator. We don't have a ventilator here for babies. Even if we did, I'm not even in this building. My office is a couple of miles down the road, and I can't be here to monitor him. We need to send him somewhere where they can take care of him and give him what he needs. And they were asking me Maddie's history, and we just knew that he probably had a diaphragmatic hernia too. They were worried about it. It scared us to death. So they told us they were putting him on a helicopter and taking him to Children's. It was the only hospital that would take him because of Maddie's history. And next thing I know, I didn't even get to hold him. They just showed him to me and they took him away. And I got to say goodbye for a brief second before he left. But it was really hard because it was 7 weeks before I even got to hold Maddie. And then here I have another baby and I can't even see him or hold him. And then Jeremy had to leave to go be with the baby. And it was very hard. I think it was probably a little more rough for us that time around than it was with Maddie, because we knew what to expect with her and we knew what was coming our way. And we knew we had a fight on our hands. But with Jeremiah, we were just so caught off guard. I was at a totally different hospital.
When you know that your child's going to be born with a defect, you go into it with a lot of stress, but you still go into it knowing. And I always thought that was hard. But then when Jeremiah was born and not knowing, then having to be separated, that was harder. But because he was taken to Children's and everything we had experienced with Maddie was kind of it was a relief for me to know that I could trust the doctors, I could trust the nurses, and that he would be taken care of.
Well, we had our own support system there already. We knew everybody. We knew so many of the nurses. And I called Dr. Letton the day they took him, right after they took him, and I said, we just had another baby, and they're bringing him to Children's, and I'm so nervous. And I'll never forget, he just said, I'll be there waiting for him. It's okay. Which was completely invaluable to us, because you're in such a scary situation, but to know that somebody who got your first baby through such a horrible, horrible time was going to be there, make sure that your second baby was okay. I just knew we were going to be okay.
So I had to do the hardest decision, which was, how can I be in two places at once? I need to be there for my wife, but I need to be there for my son. So I left because I knew she was going to be taken care of, and I headed to Children's. Don't remember much of the drive. It was a blur. Got there as quick as I could. I made my way just like I'd done in the past. I knew every floor, every step, every door. Nothing had changed. And I found myself in the very same place that I'd already spent 3 months. Went up to the counter, just as normal, signed in, asked what room they had him in. The lady behind the desk told me, and I proceeded to go through the doors, wash my hands, same routine I'd done hundreds of times. And I look up and I see one of Maddie's nurses step into a room, step back out, look down the hallway at me, and shake her head no. And I shook my head yes. She knew there's only one reason you go behind that door. So again, it was a relief that first thought you see is a nurse you're comfortable with. So when you look down the hallway and you see the nurse that you're so comfortable with, and it's just a relief to know that somebody's going to be watching out. You're where you need to be, best place possible, and they'll get you through it. So that first night, I go into his room and the flight nurses are still in there, and they look at me and they kind of chuckle and said, "How'd you get here so fast?" And I said, "Don't worry about that." They said, "He's fine. Go ahead and let us finish settling him in, and then we'll let you come in." I said, "Okay." So I go to the waiting room, and I'm waiting, and again I see more nurses, I see familiar faces everywhere, and it brings back all the feelings, emotions of Maddie. Starts flooding through me, but then all the positives, everything that they did for her, everything they did to save her life so she could be with us, they were going to do that for Jeremiah also. So the first night rolls around, things are looking good. Nurse gives him a bath. I'm in there right beside him, just enjoying being in the room with him and not having to go through the machines and the surgeries that Maddie had to go through. So I'm thinking, we can do this.
But at this point, we already knew that he did not have a diaphragmatic hernia.
Yes.
Like Maddie did.
They ruled out the diaphragmatic hernia. They chopped it up
I had
to
gestational diabetes.
Yes, gestational diabetes. He was a big baby, C-section, which, as the baby doesn't go through the birthing process, the heart doesn't get compressed, the body doesn't get compressed, and there are these issues that you stack them all together and they can fight against the baby. So that's pretty much what he went through, was he had a lot of odds stacked against him that he had to overcome, had to learn to breathe on his own, and once he got to that point he would be fine. So now it's just giving him the time he needed to figure out how to breathe, figure out how to do things on his own. So after his bath, he's doing okay, but he starts showing signs that things aren't looking quite right. And next thing you know, he starts to crash. So they come in and they say they need to do a chest tube. And I said, I don't know if I can handle this. They said he needs it, and we've got to do it. And I said, okay. And I remember going to the front desk, and I asked for a specific nurse that got me through Maddie, got us through Maddie. She was there, she had already checked in with me and said, if there's any questions, come get her.
And she was a nurse that was with Maddie on all of her darkest days. All of the
Yes.
toughest times Maddie had, this nurse just always seemed to be the one we had. So I always told Jeremy, before he left the hospital to leave me, I told him, if he gets in trouble, you go get that nurse, because she will know what to do.
So I went to the desk and asked for the nurse. And I could hear these little feet. So I go to the nurse's station at the desk and I ask for the nurse. And I hear these two little feet. They come running down the hallway, around the corner, and all the way down the other end, going to see Jeremiah. She knew exactly what was going on, that I didn't need help, Jeremiah needed help. So she goes in there and she checks him out. She's gone for 5 minutes or so, and she comes back to me. And she said, he's fine. This is what he needs. He's going to get through this. How much sleep have you had? And I tell her, none in about the last 48 hours. She said, how much coffee have you had? And I said, none. She said, let me go get you some. So she come back with no coffee and said, it was bad. Let me make you some fresh. We're going to get you through this, and we're going to get you someone who can help get you through the next day. So without that support system that we'd already established with Maddie, I don't know what I would have done. Had we gone to any other hospital out of the country or out of the state, either California, Florida, Houston, I would have had that ability to make the connections and trust in the hospital that's right here close to home. So the next day rolls around, and another nurse, that was Maddie's nurse, that had got her through the day she was born and some of her darkest and Maddie's darkest hours also. The day shift nurse came in and she said, everything's fine, I've got this. I trusted her. She said, go get some sleep. I went downstairs to get some sleep, and about 2 hours into it, she calls me. He's crashing again. So I run upstairs. They get him stabilized. They get him on a ventilator. I can't remember if they changed ventilators or what they did, but
They put him on, he wasn't on the ventilator up until that.
that's what I was thinking. Yeah, he went on the ventilator at this point, because he could not breathe at all on his own, and they prepared us, for a few weeks that this is typical of babies going through this. It's normal. Reassured us that he'll be fine. Just a little more hurdle, a couple steps backwards, but we'll make it forward. So he continues to stay on the ventilator for,
He was on the ventilator a week and a half.
Yeah, a week and a half till he got the rotavirus he ended up getting? Rotavirus. Another hurdle. But he continued getting the care he needed. We were 100% confident in the nurses, the doctors, and everybody. And it seemed to be, 2 weeks? Right at 2 weeks he made the turn?
He came home at exactly 2 weeks old.
He made that turn, and they told us that as soon as he makes the turn, it will be like a new baby, and he'll figure it all out, and he'll be ready to break out of this place and start his life. And that's exactly what he did. He has never turned back. He is called him Tonka Tough when he was born. He was a ham. He weighed 8 pounds 15 ounces when he was born, and has never been a little guy. He's been nothing but a handful ever since he left the hospital. I asked for a boy, but I'm not so sure I was ready for a boy. I tell my mom every time I see her that I'm sorry. If I was half the boy he was, I'm sorry. Because he's that feisty. He looks after his little big sister. When did he pass her in weight?
When he was 1.
He, yeah, 1 year old. He passed her, and he continues to thrive. There's no long-term effects on him. He has pushed through everything and is now a typical boy.
Yep. Maddie loved him the day he came home, and they've been best friends ever since.
He was a little colicky when he was, a baby, and Maddie.
She would call him baby wow wow because he cried all the time. Mama, where's baby wow wow?
He did cry a lot.
Yeah, but that was different, having to have 2 babies go through the NICU. And he was born when Maddie was 2.5. And then, let's see, when she was 3, she got a stomach virus. And because of everything she'd been through before, like I said, nothing is ever easy for Maddie. You and I get a stomach virus and it's a couple days, go sleep it off, and then you bounce back and you're fine. But Maddie ends up in the hospital every time she's sick because it just takes such a toll on her body. I took her to the emergency room. She was getting dehydrated. We were worried. And they did a chest x-ray every time she comes in with any kind of stomach problems or respiratory problems. They always do x-rays to make sure that her diaphragmatic hernia hasn't come back or reoccurred, and that her bowels are not obstructed. So they did an x-ray, and I remember anytime we go there, they always call Dr. Letton because he's just been so involved with her and he takes care of almost all of her needs. And he called me and said, we need to go get her spine checked because I see some scoliosis going on. Her bowels are fine. She's going to get through this stomach bug. She's going to take her a little bit, but we need to get hooked up with an orthopedic because I don't like the way her spine looks. So he sent us to Dr. Puffenbarger at Children's, which is another blessing to have so many specialists all in one place, so we're not having to drive all over the place to go from this doctor to that doctor. And we went and saw Dr. Puffenbarger. He wanted to do an MRI. He thought maybe she had Chiari malformation because kids normally don't get diagnosed with scoliosis so soon. Dr. Puff said normally it's not until after they're done growing or closer to when they hit their growth spurt in puberty. So because she was 3, he was pretty concerned. We did the MRI. She did not have Chiari malformation, but he said, the report says that her spleen is in her chest. We're going to call Dr. Letton and see what's going on there, but she did for sure have scoliosis. He gave us the degrees that her curves were. Told us that she would need to be in a back brace about 22 hours a day, 23 hours a day.
The goal was, I think he actually said 23 and a half is the goal. But realistically, kids at that age, you try to get them in it just as much as you can.
Yeah. Which is tough. It's a pretty tough.
Kids are up, running around, you're very physical, and trying to put a kid in a brace is restricting, and it's
uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable.
It doesn't feel good.
And it's not just a brace that goes around you, it's a correction brace that pushes on the curves to try to straighten them back out. So as the body grows, the goal is to straighten the curves as it grows. So with correction, you can imagine something pushing on your sides, trying to straighten your back out all the time. It's not a very comfortable, pleasant feeling.
Right, and he told us that the goal was to keep the curves from getting worse, that we would probably never make them better because scoliosis gets worse as you grow. So the goal was, let's prevent it from getting any worse. She was at 40-degree curve, and a 50-degree curve is usually when they consider doing surgery, and that's also when it can start to compress the heart and the lungs. And she doesn't have a great lung capacity as it is, so we have to be very cautious of that and keep an eye on it. So we check in with Dr. Puff every 3 to 6 months for x-rays and brace adjustments.
He sends the x-rays to Dr. Letton. They continue to monitor her condition through each other. They both kind of work on their own side of it, but still together.
Still as a team. We went and saw Dr. Letton after Dr. Puff told us that Maddie's spleen was back in her chest, and this would make her third diaphragmatic hernia. And he honestly said, you know, I'm just not sure. This is a first because she's the first to really live this long after such a big defect. So he took her x-rays and her MRI reports to a conference with him to see what all of his peers had to say, and they pretty much determined that she needed to grow. She wasn't having any complications from this, and that hopefully as she grew, she could grow her own diaphragm tissue so that when he did have to go in and repair it, maybe he could just sew her tissue back together and not have an artificial diaphragm anymore. And also, the risk of surgery was that because it's a thoracotomy, they have to go through her chest, that when it healed, her muscles would pull on her curve and actually worsen her scoliosis. So he said at that time the fix was actually more harmful, I guess, than the cure. So right now we just keep an eye on it. She's 7. We still haven't fixed her diaphragmatic hernia.
He said out of all the organs in the abdomen area, the spleen would be the one you'd want in the hole acting as a cork.
So we just continue to monitor everything day by day with her.
He said that she will tell us when she needs the surgery. The minute she starts showing signs of pain or anything giving her any problems, no questions asked, we go straight in and do surgery. But as of right now, we continue just to let her body grow
and we
try to heal itself.
We asked him, you know, what her restrictions need to be. What can she participate in? What can she not participate in? And I'll never forget his exact words were, you let her live. You let her live, and if there's a problem, I'm here to take care of it. And that is exactly what we do.
Okay.
We didn't think she would ever make it. 10% chance to survive. Here I go again. And she's 7, and you would never even know it by looking at her. She loves ballet. She loves gymnastics.
She loves music.
She loves music. She loves horses. She's always on the go, never complains. She has no idea what's ahead of her. And we're just so blessed and so lucky that she's so happy and so full of life. And if you've ever met Maddie, you know that's just what she is full of life.
Lives every day to its fullest.
Most obvious answer to how Soonerthon has impacted our life and Maddie's and Jeremiah's is because of all of the funds raised, we have access to a place to receive such amazing care right here close to home. I mean, it's just an hour drive for us, which seems like a lot, but it's nothing compared to having to go to Texas or to California or St. Louis. Those were our options when Maddie was born. So everything that you guys do allows not just us, but all the kids who need specialized care to stay so close to home and be near their family and their entire support system. The other thing that Soonerthon means to us is, I'll probably cry again, gosh darn it, seeing our kids light up. And although Jeremiah doesn't have any ongoing issues now, he has come out of his shell so much in the past 2 to 3 years. He's been the biggest shy kid I've ever seen, and each year he just comes out of his shell a little more. And when we came to the very first exec meeting and spoke, Jeremy and I laughed because when we walked in the door, everybody was like, "Where's Jeremiah? Where's Jeremiah?" And it seemed like for the first time Jeremiah had more friends there than Maddie did, which was huge.
Yes.
very huge. And it was so fun to see him running around and enjoying himself and wrestling with all the boys and waiting to see if Clark was going to throw him in the trash can. And then for Maddie, you know, to see her run around the day of Soonerthon, and not have to worry about how bad her back hurts, or Mama, can I go here because I might get sick or I might not get sick, to just enjoy herself and let all of her worries just at the door. That is priceless. And then also how much you guys inspire them. You know, you're not only raising funds for these kids, but you're inspiring them. They want to be like you, which is very awesome, I think. They see what you guys do and they know that it's for them, but they want to turn around and do the same thing that you're doing for other kids. And when they came up with the idea for their lemonade stand, I just thought, this is awesome that our kids have such positive role models to look up to and to do such big things with their lives. You guys, the way you interact with them and the examples you set for them as parents, I really don't think we could ever ask for anything more than that. At all.
All of it.
All of it?
What else? Can you have a little more?
The talent show.
Talent show?
What did you do last year in the talent show?
I think it was, you know, whole drama.
By who?
JJ.
Who got up there with you?
The girls,
Which girls?
volleyball girls.
Do you love all the friends you make?
Uh-huh.
Do you have lots of friends from Soonerthon?
Yeah.
Like who?
Hey, the camera's rolling, Bubba. Did you know that? They're recording you. What all friends do you have?
Volleyball girls. The directors. I don't remember who else. I don't remember.
Well, who's sitting in front of you right
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
What?
I love the family room. I love the family room.
You love the family room?
What are you looking forward to this year at Soonerthon?
That's it.
What are you getting? Do you know what you're gonna do this year for the talent show?
Singing.
All right.
What are you gonna sing? Do you know yet?
Either if he's going to sing it to me, I'm going to be singing 2 songs.
Oh.
First, I will be singing. Maybe. Do you know what This Is Me is? I'm probably going to sing that. Just nobody else is singing it. And then I'm going to sing with him. Like if he sings.
What are you gonna sing with brother? Do you have a song picked out?
Meant to Be.
Meant to be by who?
Florida Georgia Line feature maybe that's it.
Okay.
Alright.
Why?
To get to the movie theater.
Please tell me you can.